wrong with that. But people who are sort of attached to science and principle but who actually don't know much about it themselves, and those tend to be the communities in which you see this kind of overtly and super unhelpful sexist behaviour.
Well, I appreciate your time on the panel. Associate Professor of Physics at Auckland University, Nicola Gaston. Nicola, thank you very much for your time. What do you make of this, Cindy? Interesting, isn't it? If you don't have the evidence or the science backing you up, just start some good old-fashioned name-calling.
Well, I mean, he's not a scientist at all. He's a counsellor of a fish and game, isn't he? And, I mean, he's clearly a misogynist. Let's not forget the fact that the paper said 4 out of 6 adult species of whitebait are facing extinction. So that's actually what it's about. I mean, and you didn't point out the most misogynistic bit that he said was, this has come from people who want us not to shave our armpits. What he said was offensive. I mean, the science bit is actually almost irrelevant. Science is white, male dominated, but what this man said was incredibly offensive, old-fashioned and uninformed.
Morgan?
Yeah, this bloke is going to get a surprise when he finds out the Prime Minister's a chick, the Chief Justice is a chick, his mother was a chick. I agree. It was just, out and out misogyny there.
Yeah. And it's just so arrogant. Actually, we all love whitebait. Why would we not be why would we not be trying to do something that made the delicacy sustainable?
I can visualise a couple of patties and a bit of lettuce right now, eh? So
lemon juice.
Long may they last, indeed. Just finally, the Māori Party has selected candidates in 2 of its 3 target seats. Rawiri Waititi was selected to stand in the Bay of Plenty on the seat of Wairiki that is held by Labour's Tamati Coffey. You got Debbie Ngārewa Paka selected for the seat of Te Tai Hauru, held by Labour's Adrian Ruafe. And the very persistent rumour that JT, John Tamahere, will be standing and Tamaki Makaurau. So I haven't got a lot of time here, but I wanted to get your thoughts, Morgan. How could the Māori Party play in this year's election? What role might they have?
Just a quick note from the opening. I wasn't a former Māori Party staffer. I was a former staffer for the late Parikura Horome. He was Labour. So an important...
thank you very much.
An important distinction to make. There, but I think that they will do well this election, especially Debbie Ngārewa Paka, who lives in the Taranaki and who is running very hard on an anti-oil and gas drilling platform there, something that's of a huge concern to local Māori in the Taranaki and in her electorate. And I think she's got a real good shot this year, and that we may, still 50-50, but we may actually see the Māori Party back. And what that means for a national government or a Labour government is a really interesting question. I'm not sure how that one will play out.
Thoughts on that?
Well, I think it would be great if the Māori Party were back, but I don't think John Tamahere is a strong enough candidate. I mean, he's just stood for the mayoral elections, and unfortunately, a lot of what he said, I mean, he's illiterate.
All right, okay, well, watch this space. Watch this space indeed. Cindy Mitchener, Morgan Godfrey, thank you so much for being with me on the panel. I really appreciate it. Checkpoint next, 5 p.m. I'm Wallace Chapman. See you tomorrow, 3:45. Till then, bye.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, is the vision over? Hannah Tamaki says she sacked her political campaign manager over a disgusting social media rant. But is her husband, Pastor Bryant Tamaki's post even worse? Hannah Tamaki and Javan Golter join us. One of the country's biggest fishing companies made nearly $27,000 in donations to the New Zealand First Foundation. 4 men, including Jamie Lee Ross, all plead not guilty to charges related to political donations to the National Party. Harvey Weinstein is rushed to hospital with chest pains after being convicted of sexual assault and rape. And Kobe Bryant's widow launches legal action against the helicopter company behind the fatal crash that killed the former NBA great.
RNZ News at 5. No, my hi to my. Good afternoon. I'm Paul Brennan. A West Auckland man who killed his mother with a hammer has been found guilty of murdering her. Martin Marinovich strangled his mother Nolene and smashed her head with a hammer in their Odatia home last February. Annika Smith reports.
Martin Marinovich was his mother's sole caregiver when he killed her, then showered and drove to a nearby train station to call the police. Today, the jury in his High Court trial returned a unanimous guilty verdict after 3 hours of deliberations. Marinovich appeared emotionless as a foreman delivered the verdict. Justice Walker convicted him and remanded him in custody for sentencing in April. Ātui te ko te matua ko Annika Smith aho.
The Children's Commissioner says benefit levels have to increase, with new statistics showing no major change in the number of children living in poverty. Main benefits are to increase by 3.09% on April the 1st, but the judge, Andrew Beecroft, says that's not enough. He says he's particularly concerned that 13% of children are living in material hardship. The Commissioner says the government needs to invest more to help struggling families.
Well, I guess I had huge expectations that we'd see a downward trend, but we haven't got it. The numbers are no worse, no better.
Judge Andrew Beecroft. The independent MP facing electoral fraud charges, Jamie Lee Ross, says he'll continue to speak out about foreign influence and corruption in New Zealand politics. Mr. Ross and 3 businessmen, Zhang Yiquan, Zhang Shajia and Zhang Hangjia, all pleaded not guilty to charges of deception in the Auckland District Court. The charges relate to 2 $100,000 donations paid to the National Party. National says Mr. Ross's continued comments about being a scapegoat and whistleblower are nothing more than a vendetta. He told reporters defending the charges won't stop him speaking out.
I will continue to blow the whistle on foreign donations and agents of foreign states attempting to influence our democracy. This is too big of an issue for this country for us to say nothing.
Jamie Lee Ross. Greenpeace is demanding the government should review recent fishing policy decisions in light of undisclosed donations from a major fishing company to the New Zealand First Foundation. Records viewed by RNZ showed Tallies and its managing director, Sir Peter Talley, gave the foundation $26,950 between 2017 and 2019. Greenpeace Chief Executive Russell Norman says decisions such as not putting cameras on all commercial fishing boats have been favourable to the fishing industry.
What the Prime Minister needs to do is to review these key decisions where New Zealand First intervened to the benefit of Tallies to make sure that she is confident herself that the integrity of the decision-making process hasn't been compromised through this.
The Greenpeace Chief Executive Russell Norman. Fisheries Minister Stuart Nash says science and advice influence his decisions, not donations. Tallies refused to comment. MediaWorks has pulled Destiny Church pastor and would-be politician Hannah Tamaki from the lineup of Dancing with the Stars this year. A spokesperson from the network confirmed it was originally planned for Mrs. Tamaki to take part in the show, but after a very strong reaction realised that was a mistake. Mrs. Tamaki sacked her political campaign manager, Jevon Gulta, earlier today after his Facebook tirade against the host of the project, Kanoa Lloyd. Ms. Lloyd had criticised Mrs. Tamaki's selection as a contestant on Dancing with the Stars over what she said were her homophobic and xenophobic views. More than 100 people have been tested for the coronavirus in New Zealand. The Health Ministry says there are no official or suspected cases. However, a number of people have phoned Healthline for advice. At a news conference this afternoon, the Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, said about 120 people had been tested as a precaution. He says the 6 New Zealanders who are currently in quarantine after returning from the Diamond Princess cruise ship are doing okay. 4 minutes past 5. On to sport now. The Hurricanes say they want to keep Ardie Savea at the club and not lose him to rugby league. In a podcast, the All Black loose forward says he was contemplating a move to the NRL in 2021. Hurricanes assistant coach Chris Gibbs says it's common practice now for players to switch codes, but they're keen to keep Savea.
They're competitive athletes who work hard and they watch a lot of sport, and it's probably natural for him to want to have a crack at it. So bottom line is that Ardie's part of us, and we want him long term, and we want to win a championship and we want him to be part of it.
Hurricanes assistant coach Chris Gibbs. The Black Caps coach Gary Stead has rated his bowlers' efforts in the first Test win over India as one of their best. The New Zealanders dismissed the tourists for less than 200 twice on their way to a 10-wicket win. Stead says the way Trent Boult and Tim Southee led the attack was spot on.
Can't speak highly enough, I think, of the bowling unit and the way that they went about taking 20 wickets on a wicket that had a little bit in it the whole time, but we certainly, from my perspective, I think it's one of our most accurate performances that I've seen with the ball.
Gary Stead. Neil Wagner rejoins the squad for this week's second Test in Christchurch following the birth of his first child. And Liverpool have come from behind to beat West Ham 3-2 at Anfield to move within 4 wins of securing the English Premier title. Victory means Liverpool equal the English League record of 18 successive wins set by Manchester City in 2017. That's the news.
I'm Katherine Ryan. Tomorrow on 9 to noon, New Zealand Trade and Enterprises China Director on coronavirus and what's happening in Chinese cities and factories. Farmers Greg Hart and Jess Hill on why they're opening their gates to townies. Singer-songwriter Nadia Reid on her latest album. And the sublimely surreal world of Belgian filmmaker Jacques van Dormael. Join me on 9 to noon tomorrow on RNZ National.
Now we have the short forecast from Met Service through to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Tararua District, cloudy periods, isolated showers, however showers more widespread in Gisborne. For the remainder of the North Island, also Nelson and Marlborough, generally fine but isolated afternoon showers about Northland today and central inland areas tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, also Canterbury and Otago excluding Clutha, mainly fine with cloudy areas morning and evening, isolated showers in central Otago this afternoon. Fiordland, Southland and Clutha, periods of rain about the fjords. Elsewhere partly cloudy with a few spots of rain becoming fine tomorrow. At the Chatham Islands, often cloudy with occasional light rain, clearing there overnight tonight. It's nearly 5:08.
Thanks, Paul. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Coming up on Checkpoint, one of the country's biggest fishing companies made nearly $27,000 in donations to the New Zealand First Foundation, and 4 men charged with electoral fraud over National Party donations plead not guilty. But let's begin tonight with the first casualty of this year's election campaign, and the song and dance that is Vision New Zealand. Tonight, the party, which isn't even registering in current polls, is in disarray. And bizarrely, it all kicked off after rumours leader Hannah Tamaki would be appearing on Dancing with the Stars. Last night on the project, Kanoa Lloyd slammed Mrs Tamaki's prospects, saying she didn't want to see a homophobic Paso Doble or a xenophobic cha-cha. Her comments incensed Vision New Zealand's campaign manager, Javan Golter, so much he posted a threatening tirade about Kanoa Lloyd. But that's where things get stranger. Whilst Javan Golter told me he offered his resignation this morning, Mrs Tamaki says she sacked him. And while she deemed Mr Golter's post disgusting, her husband's equally offensive comments with accompanying photos of Ms Lloyd, the Prime Minister, and Helen Clark were seemingly okay. I spoke to Javan Golter this afternoon before he made a public apology. Rancid, rotten, stuffed pig.
Yeah, clearly I didn't think.
Do you often refer to women like that?
Don't think I've ever referred to a woman like that.
And a suicide reference, basically.
Yeah.
You fired that out in 10 seconds? Stylised like that?
Yeah, what's goes to show why it's why it looks like that, yeah.
Are you ashamed of yourself?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm not actually ashamed of myself for the fact of, people are going to criticise you for that. I'm ashamed of myself just for myself. That it wouldn't even matter if no one's seeing that, just knowing that I did that is, is not the sort of person that I'd like to think I am.
Why did you do it?
I was feeling, when I made those comments at the time, I guess I was feeling I sort of listened to some of the comments she'd made, both last night and in the past, and so I just felt were really untrue of some people, not very good reflection of everybody I know, and so just lashing out really.
Are you talking about the comments she made about Hannah Tamaki?
I guess that's what that would be. Last night is what triggered that, but no, there've been just other comments generally around things, around people that I, get a hard time.
Do you think anything justifies comments like what you posted?
No, not at all, which is why I'm not going to try and defend them whatsoever. I mean, they were poor judgment, inexcusable comments. And also, if you look at the when I went back and or when I saw what I'd said and sort of thought the effects it has, on other people, the deeper things, when I sort of looked a bit closer into that, I thought, well, that was really not on my part.
So you're not just a private individual in the sense that you work in communications and you work for Vision New Zealand, which is the political party attached to Hannah Tamaki. What conversations have you had with her about the comments that you made?
With Hannah?
Yes, or anyone from the party or Destiny.
Number of missed calls this morning. The only one I phoned was Hannah directly, and she, I just rang her basically to apologise really for when not thinking about how that, because I understand that what I say has potentially people are going to say, oh, see, that's what she thinks, but I certainly acted out on my own when I did that, and I've apologised to her for those things I said. Certainly they're not her views or my own views even.
If they're not your views, why did you post them?
Oh, because I was stupid. Yeah, because I was stupid and wasn't thinking.
Did you discuss them with Hannah Tamaki before you posted them, or anyone else associated with the party or Destiny Church?
I wish I had, because then I would have not done it, I'm sure. But no, I did that quite late last night on my own.
10 o'clock?
Yeah.
So what was Hannah Tamaki's response to your phone call? What did she say to you?
Oh, disappointed, really. Yeah.
Did she ask for your resignation?
She didn't need to. I offered it because I think that's, I offered it before she had a chance to. If she was going to, I don't know, but I wouldn't have blamed her if she had. But that was the first thing, that was why I rang her to say.
So what did you say in that conversation?
I just rang her and I said, I apologise for, I said I've made these comments and I apologise.
Did she accept your resignation?
You'd have to ring her and ask her that, but yes, I feel it was accepted. I wasn't told to be in the office in 5 minutes, so yeah.
When you say you feel it was accepted, does she not give you an express response?
No, she gave me an express response. Yes, it was accepted. She gave me, I think I was more, there's the giving her my resignation part, and then there's just the point about, that I was disappointed that I'd put her in that position. So, yeah, so I'm separating the two, really.
So, are your views, the views that you expressed in that post, are they supported by Vision New Zealand?
I don't think they'd be supported by anybody in New Zealand with that.
Are you sure about that? Are you sure that Vision New Zealand would not support those views?
Which views? The ones I made last night?
The ones that you made public last night?
Well, as I said, I don't think anybody would support those views.
Well, because Bryant Tamaki has also posted something which seems pretty close to what you posted, referring to venomous, dirty, liable, liberal, sexually confused, effeminate, booze-drenched, antichrist, false wannabes, relationally messed up, insecure people have risen in New Zealand. The media are full of them, along with social and entertainment industries, and then accompanied by a picture of Kanoa Lloyd. What do you know about that?
When was that? I haven't even seen that. Was that recently? Or?
It's on his Facebook page.
Oh, I actually don't look at other people's Facebook pages, so that's the first I've heard.
The words that you posted last night, do you consider them to be violent?
I just consider them to be disgusting and not. I think the words that I used last night were not very conducive to the environment that we're in today, and with high suicide rates and all that sort of stuff, cyberbullying. They're just disgusting comments. I don't know if I'd use violent or anything. I just words that shouldn't have ever come out of my mouth.
Do you understand that inciting someone to harm themselves is a crime?
Yes.
Yet you posted the words, she should show New Zealand what voluntary euthanasia looks like.
Yep. And as I said, inexcusable and indefensible.
Have you heard from the police today?
No, I haven't.
So what do you plan to do to put it right? Have you taken the post down?
post is gone, and been working out what the best way is to to sort of I would like to apologise to Kanoa, obviously, and I've just sort of been sitting here pondering before you turned up how I might best do that. Yeah.
And that's Javan Golter, the former campaign manager for Vision New Zealand. Now, just a reminder, this all stemmed from the news. Destiny Church pastor and would-be politician Hannah Tamaki was due to appear on this season of Dancing with the Stars. MediaWorks has confirmed that Hannah Tamaki has now been dumped from the program. And Hannah Tamaki joins us after 6 this evening. One of the country's biggest fishing companies made nearly $27,000 in donations to the New Zealand First Foundation, which has been bankrolling New Zealand First, the party. Records viewed by RNZ show the foundation received a total of $26,950 from seafood giant Tally's and its managing director, Sir Peter Tally, between 2017 and 2019. None of the donations were disclosed because there were 4 separate amounts, none of which exceeded the threshold at which donors' identities must be made public. RNZ's in-depth reporters Guyon Espiner and Kate Newton have been investigating, and Guyon Espiner filed this report.
It may sound slightly trite and corny the way I'm putting it to you, but please regard myself and indeed my leader as 2 incredibly pro-industry personalities.
Shane Jones addressing industry leaders at Seafood New Zealand's conference last year. The New Zealand First Cabinet Minister has never made a secret of his support for the industry, telling the same conference he'd been described as the Ghost Minister for Fisheries.
It's actually quite a flattering description, if you don't mind me saying.
Those remarks were among concerns Greenpeace raised in a letter to Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern last year, saying New Zealand First was too close to the industry and should not be involved in fishing policy. Jacinda Ardern responded saying she expected ministers to abide by Cabinet Manual guidelines on managing conflicts of interest. At the time, Greenpeace noted that Mr Jones had received $10,000 from Tallies for his 2017 election campaign. Now, RNZ can reveal that Tallies donated many thousands more to the New Zealand First Foundation, and none of the donations were disclosed. Greenpeace Executive Director Russell Norman said in light of the donation revelations, the Prime Minister should review recent fishing policy decisions.
The Prime Minister rightly said, that we've got to manage conflict of interest, and I totally get that. It's just a reality, it happens. But how can she possibly be managing those conflicts of interest when she has no visibility on the tens of thousands of dollars that are flowing into the New Zealand First Foundation from Tallies and related parties? So it makes it virtually impossible for her to actually manage those conflicts of interest and protect the integrity of the decision-making process.
The New Zealand First Foundation received the money from Tallies in 4 amounts, all of which individually fell below the level for making donations public. In May 2017, that's election year, Tallies deposited $7,540 into the foundation bank account. Then on the 4th of April 2019, Tallies made a $2,500 donation, followed the very next day by a donation from the company's managing director, Sir Peter Tally. That one was for $15,000, just 1 cent below the level at which donations are made public. Tallies followed that up with a 4th donation of $2,000 in July of 2019. Russell Norman says Tallies, along with other fishing companies, has lobbied the government on several issues, including opposing attempts to put monitoring cameras on fishing boats.
When there was a change of government and the new government came in, Tallies made it very clear that they were opposed to cameras on boats. New Zealand First also were very opposed to cameras on boats, even though Labor and the Greens support it. And we have not been able to progress cameras on boats under this government as a result of the New Zealand First opposition to it.
Fisheries Minister Stuart Nash eventually announced in June 2019 that only 28 vessels, those most at risk of encountering Maui dolphins, would be required to operate with onboard cameras. That same month, it was revealed fishing companies, including Tallies, had sent letters to Mr Nash, Mr Jones and Winston Peters, warning the government could face legal action over seabed protection rules in the South Pacific. And just last week, Greenpeace accused the government of caving into Talley's interests by lobbying for a Talley's vessel, the Amiltel Apollo, to be taken off an international blacklist for allegedly trawling in an area closed to fishing back in May 2018. Amiltel, the Nelson-based deep water division of the Talley's group, said the decision to remove its vessel from the blacklist was supported by all 15 member countries of the South Pacific Regional Fisheries Management Organisation. The company has also rejected any suggestion it was intentionally fishing in a closed area, saying the captain of the vessel acted with the full knowledge and complete approval of the MPI observer. Fisheries Minister Stuart Nash said donations did not influence policy and decisions were made on the basis of marine science, official advice and the cabinet process. Mr Nash, a Labour MP, said Mr Jones had experience in the area from his time at Te Ohu Kaimoana and at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. He wouldn't do an interview on tape but told Morning Report last year that he consults with both New Zealand First and the Greens over government fishing policy.
This is coalition politics. So when someone says, or when Russell Norman says that Shane Jones is influencing our fishing policy, I can say to him that I'm the Minister of Fisheries. I have a program that I want to implement, but what I want to do is actually build relationships right across the sector, and that is with the commercial sector, the rec, customary and the NGOs.
Peter Talley refused to comment on the donations when contacted by RNZ. As well as the $10,000 donation to Shane Jones, Talley's gave NZ First MP Fletcher Tabato $2,000 in 2017, which he disclosed. During that 2017 election campaign, Talley's donated a total of $40,000 to 8 other candidates, 7 from the National Party and 1 from Labour, giving each of them $5,000. All of those donations were disclosed. Shane Jones, the Minister for Economic and Regional Development, also declined to comment for this story. For Checkpoint, this is Guy and Espiner.
It is 21 minutes after 5. If you were listening to that story on the drive home, you can go back online and watch the video that goes with Guy on Espina's piece. And we'd also love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program this evening, whether it be political donations or Vision New Zealand. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. The 4 men charged with electoral fraud, including sitting MP Jamie Lee Ross, will fight the accusations made against them, pleading not guilty in their first court appearance today. Mr Ross and 3 others were charged by the Serious Fraud Office after a 10-month investigation. The charges relate to 2 $100,000 donations paid to the National Party, one in 2017 and the second in 2018. Our political editor Jane Patterson was at court and filed this report.
The 3 Auckland businessmen charged alongside Jamie Lee Ross arrived at the Auckland District Court this morning with no comment to make to the waiting media contingent. Mr Ross, Zhang Yikun, Zheng Shujia and Zheng Hungjia were charged by the SFO after a 10-month investigation. The original complaint was made by Mr Ross himself when he went nuclear on his former party National and leader Simon Bridges in late 2018. All 4 men face charges of deception. Zheng Hungjia has also been charged with providing misleading information.
All 4 defendants are in a position to be pleased today.
It was a short hearing this morning with not guilty pleas entered and a brief discussion about how the trial will proceed. Jamie Lee Ross read a short statement to reporters after his appearance.
Morning everyone. This morning I pleaded not guilty because I have never been involved in any deception to do with donations. At the time these donations were made to the National Party, I was not aware of any conspiracy to defeat the Electoral Act by anyone.
He claims to have been made a scapegoat by the National Party, but told reporters he believed it was important to come forward as a whistleblower.
I will continue to blow the whistle on foreign donations and agents of foreign states attempting to influence our democracy. This is too big of an issue for this country for us to say nothing.
The National Party and its leader Simon Bridges have insisted from the start they've acted lawfully over all party donations. Today the party issued a statement from a spokesperson saying Jamie Lee Ross's comments are nothing more than a vendetta and it does not accept the way he's characterising his part in what happened. The spokesperson says it's Mr Ross, not the party, who has ended up in court. And they say National expects evidence that will inform the public of the true facts will be presented during the trial. The donations were made to the National Party, but neither the leader nor any staff were charged. Mr Ross's lawyer, Ron Mansfield, was asked whether Mr Bridges or party officials will be called to give evidence.
Look, folks, the reality is we don't know who's going to be called as witnesses yet. We haven't received any material from the SFO. When we have, you will know about it. But at this stage, we've been pretty clear about what our position is.
Jamie Lee Ross quit National in 2018 but stayed on as the independent MP for Botany. He says he still intends to stand in that seat this September.
Nothing's changed.
And you think you can beat Christopher Luxon?
Nothing's changed.
Judge John MacDonald remanded all 4 men on bail with an order to surrender their passports to next appear in court in June. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
And if you'd like to see the video from that court appearance, Jane Patterson's item, which was filmed by Dan Cook, will go up on our webpage and our Facebook page. No worse, but no better. That's the conclusion of the Children's Commissioner following the release of the latest child poverty statistics. While the government is claiming it's lifted more than 18,000 kids out of poverty by one measure, by others there's been no significant change or progress. So is the government making inroads on its promise to tackle child poverty? Our social issues reporter Sarah Robson filed this report.
Kafa Mamaya is a solo mum of 4 on the benefit. Like thousands of others, she's finding it tough to make ends meet from week to week.
With petrol gone up, food gone up, rent's gone up. Having 4 children, the support on a benefit is just what we get is not even enough to last us to the next pay.
And Kafa Mamaya says even getting her kids the essentials can be a struggle.
I can't even afford to buy my kids clothing, I have to go to the op shops just to get them clothing, and the only brand new things I can afford for them is buying them their brand new undies and socks and towels, but clothing, and I can't afford that either.
The figures from Stats NZ show that while there's been a general decline in child poverty across most measures, it's not statistically significant. The number of children living in households where they struggle to afford the basics remains at about 13%, or 1 in 8 children. The percentage of children living in poverty before housing costs are deducted dropped from 16.5% to just under 15%, with almost 15,000 children lifted out of poverty. But after housing costs are deducted, there's an even higher number of children living in poverty. However, figures show there's been a 2% drop to 21%, and on that measure the government is claiming success, with more than 18,000 children lifted out of poverty. But the Children's Commissioner, Judge Andrew Beecroft, says those figures are underwhelming.
Well, I guess I had huge expectations that we'd see a downward trend. But we haven't got it. The numbers are no worse, no better.
The Stats NZ figures don't show the full effect of the government's $5.5 billion families package. But for families in the worst poverty, Susan St John from the Child Poverty Action Group says that won't make much difference.
Really concerningly, it seems that for the numbers of children underneath the very lowest poverty line, 40% after housing cost poverty line, that we've seen no change, and that we're likely to see no change in 2021 either. And that's hardly surprising because the families package wasn't really designed to lift those children out of poverty.
For the first time, Stats NZ has also been able to produce child poverty statistics for different ethnic groups. They show that 1 in 4 Māori children are living in households facing material hardship, and that number is even higher for Pacific children. Susan St John says that should ring alarm bells.
It does really, I think, give the government a wake-up call that they will have to do something to take effect immediately, not something introduced in the budget.
The government has set a raft of 3- and 10-year targets for reducing child poverty. Andrew Beecroft says increasing benefits has got to be a priority.
We've got the money, there's a surplus. My plea is spend it. Great that we're improving eroded infrastructure. Why aren't we prioritising children in the same way with that surplus?
The National Party leader, Simon Bridges, says as the cost of living rises, the Prime Minister is failing on her promise to lift families out of poverty. But Jacinda Ardern insists the government is making gains.
7 out of 9 of those child poverty indicators have improved, and we are reversing what we inherited when we came into office. 20,000 children have been lifted out of poverty. Yes, there is more to do, but I'm proud that we have reversed what was a very negative trend for New Zealand.
Jacinda Ardern would not say whether base benefit levels should be increased. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, former Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein is rushed to hospital after being found guilty of sexual assault and rape. The battle to save the South Island's alpine tussock from the jaws and hooves of an unwanted invader. And surprise, a woman in Huntly discovers she's sharing her house with thousands of wasps. Can't be too pleasant, can it? Hey, do get in touch about anything you've heard on the program this evening. The text is 2101. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can always flick us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. We would love to hear from you. Time now for the headlines with Paul.
Thank you, Lisa. A West Auckland man who killed his mother with a hammer has been found guilty of murdering her. Martin Marinovich strangled his mother Nolene and smashed her head with a hammer in their Otatia home last February. More than 100 people have been tested for the coronavirus in New Zealand as a precaution. The Health Ministry says there are no official or suspected cases. However, a number of people have phoned Healthline for advice. An Auckland lawyer has been sent to jail for almost 3 years for helping the Comancheros gang hide their money. Andrew Simpson and the gang's Vice President Tyson Daniels were sentenced on money laundering charges in the High Court at Auckland today. Police seized $4 million in assets during raids last year. The Children's Commissioner says benefit levels have to increase as new statistics show no major change in the number of children living in poverty. Overall, 13% of children are living in material hardship, but the number is higher for Māori and Pacific children. The independent MP facing electoral fraud charges says he'll continue to speak out about foreign influence and corruption in New Zealand politics. Today, Jamie Lee Ross and 3 other men pleaded not guilty to the charges relating to donations to the National Party. MediaWorks has pulled Destiny Church pastor and would-be politician Hannah Tamaki from the lineup of Dancing with the Stars this year. A spokesperson from the network confirmed it was originally planned for Mrs. Tamaki to take part in the show, but after a very strong reaction realised that was a mistake. And the Me Too movement says the Harvey Weinstein verdict would not have been possible without the survivors who courageously spoke out. The former Hollywood producer has today been found guilty of sexual assault by a jury in New York and faces up to 25 years in jail. Those are the headlines.
Thanks, Paul. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And it's time now for the business news with Nona Pelsier, who's joined me in the studio. Another interesting day on the markets, Nona, but let's start with Mercury. The first half-year profit is down on last year and a weaker outlook, you're telling me. What's the market reaction and what's going on?
Yeah, well, the first half profit was down 20% to, well, still a healthy number, $83 million. And their revenue was also down, I guess, 14%. But really, it's the wholesale market has been affected by the dry weather, and that's affecting the hydro lakes and so on. In addition to that, there's been really, really tough competition on the retail side, and that's and wholesale prices as well. There's a lot of competition there, and so that's reflected in the result for sure. As well, the company sold their smart metering business for something like about $270 million odd, something like that. They reinvested that into building a wind farm near Palmerston North, which is, a big wind farm. It's in response really to the changes that we're seeing with thermal generation. And that's where some of the shortages are quite expensive now to get that thermal generation when we have dry years. Fraser Winnery, who's the outgoing chief executive, I should say, because this is pretty much his last week with Mercury after 11 years in the job. He's taking a new role with Fonterra as the chief operating officer there. His outlook for this year is he dropped the underlying profit guidance by $10 million. To $500 million from $510 million. But he said overall that's still a very good result for Mercury. And the market, considering the day, wasn't too bad. It was down 0.75%. And now you compare that to how our market ended the day, just about 1%. Not so bad. So it beat the market overall. But it certainly was a different story for a lot of other companies. We saw a great deal of volatility, as we expected yesterday when we talked about how the market ended here, opening into Asia. It was a rough go.
So, well, what does that mean for people who are invested? I mean, one of the comments today has been that obviously a lot of people's super funds are in shares and the like. So what's the talk out there?
Well, okay, so we started the day down about 3%, and we finished down about 1%. U.S. futures are looking a lot more positive. They bounced back after about a 3% drop on Wall Street, and terrible results also in Europe. I spoke with Mark Lister, who's the head of wealth research at Craig's Investment Partners, and we have a little bit of what he had to say.
I think for the most part, investors would be wise to just stay the course. If you're in KiwiSaver, if you've got an investment portfolio that is aligned to your objectives and your sort of investment time horizon, then you're probably fine. If you're a long-term investor, you probably want a bit of a sell-off so you can do some buying. If you're a conservative investor that's nearing retirement, you should have a whole lot of bonds and fixed income in your portfolio anyway, and those assets are actually going up because of the uncertainty. So for most people, if they've got a well-constructed portfolio and if they've had some good advice, they should be fine.
And that's the head of wealth research at Craig's Investment Partners, Mark Lister. Now, so how did the market end? In the end,
Exactly.
We were down, so we clawed back much of the losses that we had earlier on. We finished down 138 points. That's 1.2% to 11,719. That's still stronger than where we started the year, by the way. Our dollar is a bit stronger, as a matter of fact, 63.5 US cents, 95.9 Australian, and 49 British pounds.
Round 49.
Yeah,
there you go. Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business news this evening. The former Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein is tonight in hospital instead of behind bars after being convicted of sexual assault and rape. Weinstein faces up to 25 years in jail but was rushed to hospital complaining of chest pains after the verdict. He was cleared of the most serious count of predatory sexual assault, which carried a penalty of life imprisonment. It's a milestone verdict for the Me Too movement that inspired women to go public with misconduct allegations against powerful men. The ABC's David Lipson reports from New York.
For decades, there have been whispers and innuendo in the backlots of Hollywood about producer Harvey Weinstein and how he treats women behind closed doors. Today, in the New York criminal courts, his crimes were declared beyond reasonable doubt.
And I was jumping for joy, and I started to cry, and it just gave me life again.
Ambra Gutierrez is the Italian model who wore a wire in 2015 after telling police she'd been groped by Weinstein.
I'm a famous guy. I'm feeling very uncomfortable right now. Please come in now.
Outside the court today, she told ABC she feels vindicated and energised to continue her fight for the worldwide movement known as Me Too.
You played such an important role in starting this whole movement. How do you feel now at the end of this chapter?
It's not an end. There is so much work to do. I feel that right now it's not like, okay, I was right, he was wrong. It's more like this is an example for many to follow. Someone that even this powerful, can never treat people in that way that it did.
Her accusations were not part of this trial. Two other women had accused Weinstein of attacks in 2006 and 2013 in his Manhattan apartment and a New York hotel. They gave emotional and graphic testimony during the month-long trial, backed up by accounts of those close to them. Weinstein pleaded not guilty to all counts. And under rigorous cross-examination, both women acknowledged they had had ongoing friendly relations, even consensual sex with the producer after the alleged attacks. After 5 days' deliberations, the jury found he was guilty of rape in the third degree and criminal sexual assault, which carry respective maximum sentences of 4 and 25 years in jail. He was handcuffed in the courtroom and led away to prison ahead of sentencing on March 11. Prosecutor Cyrus Vance Jr. described the survivors as heroic.
Weinstein is a vicious serial sexual predator
who used his power to threaten, rape, assault, trick, humiliate and silence his victims.
Weinstein was also found not guilty of the more serious charges of predatory sexual assault, which could have seen him locked up for life. Another court case awaits him in LA, more charges of rape and sexual assault. Women around the world, like Ambra Gutierrez, will be watching.
It was really that audio, though, that brought this all to the surface, wasn't it?
Yeah, I feel it helped, and I'm happy it helped other people. So, yeah, it was worth it.
And that report was from the ABC's David Lipson. A West Auckland man who attacked his mother with a hammer before calling the police has been found guilty of murder. Martin Marinovich was his mother's sole carer when he smashed her head with a hammer in their Otatia home last February. The 28-year-old told a family friend he couldn't cope a week before he attacked her, and today he was found guilty of murder. Our court reporter Annika Smith has been following the case and joins us now. Annika, so bring us up to date. What happened in court today?
Well, today, after Justice Walker summed up the case, the jury went out and had to decide whether this case was murder or manslaughter, Martin Marinovich having accepted that he attacked his mother with a hammer and killed her. Now, after 3 hours of deliberations, they returned with a unanimous guilty verdict that was unanimous guilty of murder. Martin Marinovich was emotionless, as he has been throughout much of this trial in the dock, and he's been remanded in custody to reappear in April for sentencing.
So what is the backstory to the case? We heard a lot about him caring for his mother. What is the background?
Yeah, the evidence that was called over the course of last week really painted a picture of the background, but also the context in which this attack happened last February. We started by hearing a 111 call that Martin Marinovich made to police the night that he attacked his mother. He attacked her with a hammer, showered, and then drove to a nearby train station where he called police and effectively dobbed himself in. It was a highly distressing phone call. He was panting, at times not making sense and crying. And when he was located by police, he told them that he'd killed his mother. He actually gave evidence in his own defence last week. He said it had snapped after having an argument with his mother over money. Money was extremely tight. They were living off his mother's sickness benefit. And he was in charge of keeping the house, looking after her, taking her medication, that sort of a thing. So he said he snapped after this argument, strangled her, she died, then he picked up a hammer and smashed her head. He was very clear to say that she was dead before he picked up the hammer. But a post-mortem showed that Nolene Marinovich, that was his mother's name, actually had defensive injuries consistent with a hammer to her forearm and hand. So his story didn't quite match the forensic evidence. Martin Marinovich was cross-examined by Crown Prosecutor Robin McCoubry, and he couldn't really say why he picked up the hammer, given his story. And following his story, his mother was dead by the time he did that. What he was thinking at the time that he picked up the hammer was crucial to the jury's inquiry today, and they found that he had an intention to kill her.
So he looked after his mother full time. There was evidence that things were sort of degenerating in terms of the condition of the house and his care of her as well, wasn't there?
That's right. When police arrived at the scene and found Nolene Marinovich dead, the house was in a really filthy state. The toilet wasn't working. It was very dirty and unkept. It was clear that it hadn't been properly kept for a long time. Martin Marinovich told the jury that with all he had to do looking after his mother, he didn't have time to clean the house. We heard that Nolene had bipolar disorder, was diagnosed with that a very long time ago and had been actually quite well for at least a decade, managed with medication, but her actual physical health had deteriorated quite a bit over the past few years, and she'd become particularly unsteady on her feet and would have falls or collapse and be admitted to hospital. She was actually admitted to hospital a week before she died, and we heard last week from a family friend, Janet Daniel, who visited her in hospital and spoke to Martin Marinovich, who told Ms. Daniel that he couldn't cope looking after his mother anymore. She told him, look, Martin, don't bring her home, leave her in hospital. But of course, we know that she did go back home, and that's when the attack happened. We've contacted the Waitemata DHB to query what support, if any, was offered to this family, but they've come back to us saying they're unable to release details due to patient confidentiality.
So what happens next?
So Martin Marinovich will appear in the High Court for sentencing in April. It's expected, as with any murder conviction, he will receive a life sentence.
Thanks, Annika. That is Annika Smith, who has been in court for that case involving Martin Marinovich, who has today been found guilty of murdering his mother. He was her sole carer. A top member of the Comancheros and an Auckland lawyer have been jailed for laundering millions of dollars for the gang. After a large police raid on the Comancheros gang last year, the Vice President, Tyson Daniels, and their lawyer, Andrew Neil Simpson, were sentenced today in the High Court in Auckland. At the time of the raids, police warned professionals who help gangs, you will be caught. John Bond was at the High Court and filed this report.
After a long investigation into the Comancheros, last April 80 police simultaneously raided 10 properties across Auckland linked to the fledgling gang. Police came away with guns, cars and cash and made a host of arrests. They specifically noted that one of those arrested was a lawyer, a modest, gangly, bespectacled man, Andrew Neil Simpson. He claimed he was duped into helping them and, as a good man, didn't know where the money came from. Today, in sentencing at the Auckland High Court, Justice Gerard Van Behamen addressed Simpson directly.
There is little doubt that you were at least naive and incredibly foolish to get involved in this scheme. I accept that you did not know directly, as Mr. Daniels knew, that you were involved in laundering funds from serious drug offending. In your own words, you turned a blind eye to the source of the funds.
Today, Simpson was jailed for 2 years and 9 months after pleading guilty to 13 charges of money laundering involving more than $2 million. Through a weaving system of bank accounts and trusts, he helped the Comancheros hide their money. The police said more and more professionals are helping increasingly complex organised criminal groups as the money and stakes in the drug game increases. In the dock with Simpson was the second in charge of the Comancheros, Tyson Daniels.
Mr. Daniels, as Vice President of the Comancheros, you oversaw the gang's operations and directed its criminal activity. You had overarching responsibility for the operation, even if you left its implementation to others. You received significant personal benefits from the operation, including the purchase and use of luxury vehicles.
Daniels was jailed for 4 years and 8 months after pleading guilty to 9 counts of money laundering and 1 of participating in an organised criminal group. Neither of these 2 men were charged with drug offences. Simpson's lawyer, Guyon Foley, says his client believed the money was legitimate revenue from a concrete company.
He naively believed the explanations given to him. He wanted to believe the people were in good heart. Mr. Simpson naively, foolishly, but never greedily, fell for it hook, line and sinker. And the perplexing aspect of how Mr. Simpson became involved in money laundering for relatively little financial gain.
He put forward that Simpson received only $18,000 for his time, nothing like the wealth seen inside the gang. Justice Van Behamen did not accept that fully and said Simpson was a key facilitator of the offending.
You made it work. You set up the trust through which the funds flowed. Secondly, you made it work because of your position as a lawyer and a member of a professional body. You used your professional skill and your knowledge and your solicitor's trust fund both to make happen and to lend respectability to an operation laundering large amounts of money acquired from serious drug offending.
Daniel's lawyer, Marie Dyberg QC, said other than his admission of guilt, there were no mitigating factors to consider in sentencing. Simpson, however, with 5 children under 13, did receive a discount, but Justice Van Behamen imprisoned him despite his remorse.
To impose a custodial sentence on you is to impose a sentence on your spouse and your children. I deeply regret a father being separated from a young family, both in your case and that of Mr. Daniels. Sadly, Mr. Simpson, that is the consequence of your decisions.
7 others arrested in the raids will go to trial in September on a range of financial, drug and firearm charges. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jordan Bond, tēnei.
It's 12 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Prime Minister has arrived in Fiji, where talks have quickly turned to climate change and what more can be done. Fiji's Prime Minister, Frank Bainimarama, has sent a message to Jacinda Ardern asking that she help demand more from neighbours, a clear dig at Australia's resistance to any real action. Our political reporter Joe Moyer is in Suva and joins us live now. Joe, so what's happened in the meeting today between the Prime Ministers?
Yeah, hi Lisa. It's been quite an interesting meeting today, obviously very dominated by those sort of climate change talks, something that they have a lot of sort of joint work in that area together. Also talking about, the strength of the relationship. Now, bear in mind, obviously, back in 2006 when Frank Bainimarama took over with that military coup, that was under the Helen Clark government. Very tense, sanctions got put on and it was a very difficult relationship to a lesser extent under the John Key government. But it's a very different relationship with Jacinda Ardern and with Frank Bainimarama, and they do clearly get on very well. That is very much helped, though, by that work that they are doing in that climate change space. Now, Frank Bainimarama talking to the media in the joint press conference afterwards was quite sort of strong in the comments that he was making and was clearly making some quite direct digs at countries who aren't doing what New Zealand is. So he talked about that window quickly closing for the rest of the international community to actually match these world-leading efforts that Fiji and New Zealand are doing. And he referenced the fact that he's talking about his neighbours with that. So bear in mind here that Frank Bainimarama and Scott Morrison, of course, clashed very heavily at the last Pacific Islands Forum in Tuvalu. That was where Bainimarama accused Scott Morrison of insulting behaviour, and it all sort of kicked off there and has carried on, really. Now, he talked today in the press conference about knowing that he could count on Jacinda Ardern to not only do the right thing, but to join Fiji in demanding the right thing from the rest of the world as well. So we put those comments to Jacinda Ardern in the press conference that we had with her just a short time ago. And her response to that was that she's frustrated by the idea that somehow her going and sort of wagging her finger at someone like Scott Morrison is going to change Australia's domestic policies. She says that's not an accurate reflection of the way that any of these countries do politics, and it's just not her style.
So we can, take from that she's not going to raise this message when the pair meet in Australia later in the week?
That's right. I mean, she's going to have this annual Trans-Tasman talk in Sydney with Scott Morrison on Thursday. She did say last week when she briefed the media ahead of this trip that she didn't plan to bring up climate change because she doesn't like to preach to countries about their domestic climate change policy. Now, we did ask whether that might have changed given the comments that have been made today and the conversations that have been had.
Oh, we're just losing you a little bit there, Joe. Can you still hear me? No, I think we've lost Joe Moyer there in Fiji, and she was talking about the fact that obviously Frank Bainimarama and Jacinda Ardern met today, and the Fijian Prime Minister, is basically sending a message about what he sees as a lack of assistance from Australia. Now, thousands packed into the Staples Centre in LA to pay tribute to basketball star Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna. The pair died in a helicopter crash last month alongside 7 others. Kobe's widow, Vanessa Bryant, spoke candidly to the crowd of 20,000 people about her loss, as did basketball legend Michael Jordan. Beyonce and Alicia Keys performed, and fans with and without tickets paid their respects outside the stadium. CNN's Connor Powell reports.
I'm here because I love Kobe, and this was one of his favorite songs.
More than 20,000 fans, friends, and family gathered to say goodbye to one of the greatest basketball players of all time, Kobe Bryant, and his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna.
I don't think any of us could have imagined this.
Many of Bryant's former Los Angeles Lakers teammates were in the audience, with the team's general manager giving a touching tribute to Mamba.
Kobe the best friend, Kobe the dad, and Kobe the husband.
Bryant's wife of 18 years, Vanessa, gave an emotional tribute to Gigi and Kobe, the MVP of Girl Dads.
Gigi would have most likely become the best player in the WNBA. She would have made a huge difference. I couldn't see him as a celebrity, nor just an incredible basketball player. He was my sweet husband and the beautiful father of our children. He was mine.
In the game of basketball, in life, as a parent, Kobe left nothing in the tank. He left it all on the floor.
And that report from CNN's Connor Powell. Now, just before that memorial began, lawyers for Kobe Bryant's wife, Vanessa, announced that she's taking legal action over the death of her husband and her daughter. The BBC's David Willis reports.
Well, only moments before this memorial service got underway came word that Vanessa Bryant, Kobe Bryant's widow, had filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the company that supplied the helicopter that Kobe Bryant and his 13-year-old daughter Gianna were travelling on at the time of the crash. Now, the lawsuit claims that the pilot failed to take proper precautions in regards to the weather. It was very foggy at the time, and it seeks recompense for the family's loss of financial support and for funeral expenses. Now, a federal inquiry into the cause of that crash is still underway.
And a major conservation plan is being developed to protect the South Island's unique alpine environment from Himalayan tars. The large goat-like animals were introduced to New Zealand during the early days of European settlement. The Department of Conservation says tars are wrecking native alpine tussocks in their search for food and destroying the ecosystem in the South Island's alpine regions. But it's hoped that a renewed focus on tars can help reduce the population. Our reporter Anand Zaki went to the rugged mountains near Mount Cook to find out more.
1,600 metres above sea level, overlooking the picturesque Lake Pukaki on the Ben Ohau range, it's easy to miss the signs. For the untrained eye, the steep mountains look like any other, with tussocks and rocks scattered around. But the Department of Conservation's Biodiversity Monitoring Ranger Ingrid Gruner says for those who know the area, it's quite different.
With my experience and what I've seen in other places, I can tell you that this used to look quite different. There used to be tall tussocks here, possibly quite dense in places, especially in the more moister areas. There would have been denser tussocks. They would have been up to your waist.
The Himalayan tar has long been a problem following its introduction to New Zealand. DOC's Tar Control Program Manager James Holborough says there are about 35,000 of the animals on public conservation land, with more believed to be on private land. The only way to kill them is by shooting, either on a helicopter or on the ground.
So high numbers of tar have quite strong localised impacts. We won't necessarily see those impacts everywhere in the environment, but what we'll see, tar tend to herd together, and where they herd together they'll tend to have quite strong effects. They're hooved animals, so their hooves tend to damage the soil, can damage the plants, they'll graze quite heavily.
Mr Holborough says DOC are in the early stages of developing a new plan to cull tar. He says the plan is likely to indicate the areas DOC will focus on to reduce tar numbers.
Probably likely to be two phases of planning. We'll need to do some more tar control next winter, so we'll be working with our treaty partner, Ngāi Tahu, to develop that plan with our tar stakeholders. And then we're also trying to make sure we can have a longer term plan that will run for, say, the next 5 or so years.
It's also now easier for hunters to record how many tars they've killed.
We're publishing information on where we've observed bull tar over last winter's control to give ideas where the populations are. We've also got a recreational tar app that we've developed with the Game Animal Council and the New Zealand Tar Foundation. Hunters can use that app to report the tar that they're shooting when they're out hunting.
It's hoped the plan will reduce tar numbers to about 10,000, which will hugely benefit native tussocks. DOC ecologist Brian Rice says tussocks play a vital role in preserving the alpine ecosystem.
These snow tussocks, they're really like the trees in the forest. You know, they're the canopy species, so they're the dominant in the vegetation here. And also like forest, they're old, they're very long-lived. These species will grow and live for several hundred years.
Ingrid Gruner says despite the tar control plan, it'll take many years for the tussocks to recover.
It's a slow process because, we're in a very cold environment that is covered in snow for much of the year, so it's not an annual thing, so you won't see any difference next year. We've got some sites over on the west coast where things probably are a little bit more fast growing.
Despite the slow pace of regeneration, Dr. Gruner says today's actions will help preserve the long-term future of New Zealand's pristine alpine environment. In Mount Cook Village for Checkpoint, Anand Zaki.
And just some time for your feedback before we go to the 6 o'clock news on the subject of donations, and in particular the New Zealand First Foundation story we played earlier in the program. Andrew's got in touch to say if now is not the time to change electoral finance law and even more seriously consider public financing, then I don't know when is. Linda from Christchurch has been in contact about child poverty statistics. Again, the government's saying it's raised about 18,000 children out of poverty, but that's using one particular measure, and using others, the shift has, well, been marginal, arguably. Governments of all stripes have for the last 30 years ignored the injustice of secondary tax laws. People working 2 or 3 jobs to support their families or themselves are taxed savagely on the extra jobs. These archaic laws, says Linda, were introduced decades ago when it was possible for a family to live on one wage. I've written to every tax reform committee and have never received a reply, including Sir Michael Cullen's reforms. Thanks for getting in touch, Linda.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. Top government ministers are meeting tourism bosses and airport chiefs in the Beehive right now to discuss how best to cope with the fallout from the COVID-19 coronavirus. The tourism sector estimates New Zealand is missing out on up to $50 million a week due to the ban on foreign travellers arriving from mainland China. Last week, the government announced an $11 million boost to Tourism New Zealand to help attract tourists from other countries. The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, and the Tourism Minister, Kelvin Davis, are now sitting down with the industry, Air New Zealand and airport representatives to plan the best use of that money. The New Zealand stock market has closed moderately softer, about 1% lower, amid investor concerns about the impact of the coronavirus on the world economy. The benchmark top 50 index at one stage was more than 3% lower, but clawed back much of its losses to close 138 points, or 1.2% down. Most stocks fell, but companies with heaviest exposure to travel and tourism and those reliant on direct trade and business with China were the biggest losers. US and European markets fell more than 3% as a growing toll from COVID-19 was reported in Italy, South Korea and Iran. Analysts say financial markets will remain volatile in the short term until there's some clarity about the virus. The National Party has hit back at Jamie Lee Ross over his continued comments about electoral fraud, saying he's the one who ended up in court. Mr Ross and 3 Auckland businessmen have pleaded not guilty to charges related to 2 $100,000 donations paid to the National Party in 2017 and 2018. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Zhang Yikun, Zheng Shizha and Zheng Hongsha made no comment arriving at court this morning. They and Mr Ross faced deception charges, with the SFO asserting 2 donations were broken up into smaller amounts before being paid into a National Party electorate bank account to avoid disclosure rules. Mr Ross claims to be a scapegoat and whistleblower, but stands by his decision to speak out. The National Party questions how he's characterising himself, saying evidence showing the true facts will be presented when the case goes to trial. In Auckland, Jane Patterson.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says New Zealand First has no more say over the government's fisheries policy than Labour or the Greens. RNZ has revealed the seafood giant Tally's and its managing director Sir Peter Tally gave the New Zealand First Foundation nearly $27,000 between 2017 and 2019. Speaking to reporters in Fiji, Ms Ardern disputed any suggestion that New Zealand First had a disproportionate influence over the government's fisheries policy.
They have as much as a role as the New Zealand Green Party and as the Labour Party. We're an MMP government, so of course we discuss and debate policies together, but the Minister is Stuart Nash.
Jacinda Ardern says Mr Nash, who is a Labour MP, makes policy decisions based on science and evidence. A jury deliberated for just 3 hours before a unanimous guilty verdict for a West Auckland man who murdered his mother with a hammer. Martin Marinovich strangled his mother Nolene and smashed her head with a hammer in their Odatia home last February. He was her sole caregiver when he killed her. Marinovich appeared emotionless as the foreman delivered the verdict. Justice Walker convicted him and remanded him in custody for sentencing in April. An Auckland lawyer has been sent to jail for more than 2 years for helping the Comancheros gang hide their money. Andrew Simpson and the gang's Vice President Tyson Daniels were sentenced on money laundering charges in the High Court at Auckland today. Police seized $4 million in assets during the raids last year. Justice Gerard van Behamen told Simpson he was a critical part of the gang's operation, despite him pleading ignorance.
There is little doubt that you were at least naive and incredibly foolish to get involved in this scheme. I accept that you did not know directly, as Mr. Daniels knew, that you were involved in laundering funds from serious drug offending. In your own words, you turned a blind eye to the source of the funds.
Justice Gerard van Behamen. A New Zealand transgender astronomer has paid tribute to the woman who broke barriers at NASA. Katherine Johnson died yesterday, aged 101. She was one of a group of black women mathematicians celebrated in the 2016 movie Hidden Figures. An associate professor of physics at Auckland University says Ms. Johnson was not only brilliant in her field, but was a role model for minority groups. Katherine Johnson calculated the precise trajectories that let Apollo 11 land on the moon in 1969, and after Neil Armstrong's history-making moonwalk, helped it return to Earth. J.J. Eldridge says she blazed a trail for many who thought science was otherwise out of reach. It's nearly 5 minutes past 6. On to sport now. The Black Caps coach, Gary Stead, believes their recent results show how difficult it is for teams to win away from home. The New Zealanders bounced back from their 3-0 Test series hiding in Australia with a convincing 10-wicket win over India in Wellington this week. Stead says home field advantage is influential.
Australia, unfortunately, we didn't get it right there, and I think the guys know that. But to come back and I think put the performance on the board here that we did shows how tough it is to win away, and I think that's the same with anywhere you go around the world.
New Zealand's win has moved them up to 4th in the World Test Championship standings. Sport New Zealand says changing public opinion about how children should participate in grassroots sports will not be easy. Community manager Jeff Barry says a 6-week campaign launched today in conjunction with New Zealand's top 5 participation sports will go some way to starting a conversation, even if people disagree with the change in directions. The public awareness campaign focuses on encouraging young people to play multiple sports rather than specialising early, and emphasises fun and development over winning.
Without doubt, the change is really, really challenging that we're seeking, because it does go against some of the grain of what people think. But we do want to challenge that, and we know that there is a different way to approach giving young people what they deserve out of sport.
Jeff Barry of Sport New Zealand there. That's the news.
Coming up on Nights, Alan Dean puts in a good word for social media in this evening's Window on the World, and our military historian Damien Fenton remembers one of the bloodiest and longest battles of the Second World War, the Siege of Budapest, when German and Hungarian fascists took on the Red Army, and in which pretty much everyone loses. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Here's the short forecast now from Met Service through to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Tararua District, cloudy periods, isolated showers, however showers more widespread in Gisborne. For the rest of the North Island, also Nelson and Marlborough, generally fine, but isolated afternoon showers about Northland today and central inland areas tomorrow. Buller and Westland, also Canterbury and Otago, excluding Clutha, mainly fine with cloudy areas morning and evening. Isolated showers in central Otago this afternoon. Fiordland, Southland and Clutha, periods of rain about the fjords. Elsewhere, partly cloudy, a few spots of rain becoming fine tomorrow. Chatham Islands, often cloudy, with occasional light rain clearing overnight tonight. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Paul. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Police have tonight confirmed they are looking into at least one complaint about a threatening and derogatory social media post made by Vision New Zealand's former campaign manager, Javan Golter. Vision New Zealand leader Hannah Tamaki this afternoon sacked Mr Golter over what she's described as a disgusting Facebook post, but she's refusing to condemn a similar online rant by her husband, Bishop Bryant Tamaki. Campaign manager for the fledgling party, Javan Golter, has since apologised for the offensive comments about MediaWorks presenter Carnor Lloyd that compared her to a pig and invited her to, quote, show New Zealand what voluntary euthanasia looks like. Hannah Tamaki claims she gave her PR man the boot on the spot. But today, her husband, Bishop Bryant Tamaki, posted a similar tirade, referring to venomous, dirty liberal left, sexually confused antichrists, saying the media was full of them. with an accompanying photo of Ms Lloyd, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, and former Prime Minister Helen Clark. I spoke to Ms Tamaki this afternoon and asked her to explain exactly what was wrong with her campaign manager's post.
There's a lot of things wrong with it. To me, obviously, Javan was upset with what he'd seen and heard, didn't like it, and just reacted in the way that he reacts. I'm not sure how he came to saying and creating what he did, because I'm not him. We're totally different people.
Understand that, but I'm interested.
I don't like it at all. I didn't like it. Well, I didn't actually want to get into that with him. I didn't want to say what made you do that, but from my quick look at it, I can tell it was just a very bad reaction to something that he'd seen and didn't like.
But you don't condone it, do you?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I do not condone it. I am not that sort of person. I would never even create anything in jest like that.
So how would you characterise it? In your press statement, you say the language is disgusting. Is that how you feel?
It is. Yeah, I think it is disgusting to actually talk about any person, but to talk about a woman who, Does he know her personally? I don't know her personally, and I don't think anyone has a right to talk about anybody like that. And that's how I personally feel.
So did you sack him or did he resign?
Well, we were playing phone tag this morning, and then mid-morning I got hold of him, and he said he was ringing to resign. I said, no, I'm ringing you back to tell you that I'm sacking you. I have had enough. That behaviour is not acceptable. I'm not going to tolerate it, even if you're a friend. And, he was very apologetic and said to me, I'm going to take it down. I'm going to apologise. I said, yeah, that'll be great. But I'm still sticking by with what I've just said to you. In the next 20 minutes or so, a press release is going to go out, and it's going to have that's what I'm doing. I don't know if anyone will pick it up and report it, but that's what I'm going to do, Javan, and he totally understood.
So just to be clear, you sacked him because of his disgusting and nasty post?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, given your disgust at his comments, Javan Golter's comments, you must be pretty offended by the post from your husband, Bishop Bryant Tamaki, today, referring to venomous, dirty, liberal left, sexually confused, effeminate, booze-drenched, antichrist, false wannabes, and then saying the media are full of them.
Whose name was on it? Whose name was on it?
Sorry, your point?
Who was he naming? Who was he naming?
It contained a photo of Nicola Lloyd and the Prime Minister underneath the post, as part of the post.
Underneath the one you just said to me. He's going to do his tweets and do what he does. I'm going to do what sits right with me. He did not do that under Vision New Zealand. I can't go around and say, I'm sacking you out of Vision New Zealand, because he's not doing that for Vision New Zealand. What happened today was between me, the party, and Javan.
So is that similar behaviour, parallel behaviour, almost identical behaviour by your husband acceptable?
What Brian does is his business. He did not name a person. He was not reacting to
He stood next to you at the launch
Javan
of your party. Your husband stood next to you at the launch of your party.
Lisa, you all came to hear Brian announce we were having a party. Then Brian handed it over to me to let you all know, the media, that I was going to be the leader and that he was not going to be the leader.
You've described him previously as your biggest supporter.
I am still the leader of Vision New Zealand. Unless the team decide I am not fit or able or acceptable to be the leader.
As leader of Vision New Zealand, yes, you're leader of Vision New Zealand, so as leader,
yes, I am.
I'm asking you your position, because voters really, they have a right to know who they may or may not be voting for. So as leader of Vision New Zealand, if I could just finish.
For me, Hannah Tamaki,
as leader of Vision New Zealand, they'd want to know where you stand morally and ethically. So you've said Javan Golter's words are disgusting. So are Bryant Tamaki's words disgusting as well, because they're very similar?
This is what you do all the time. You just like to talk over people. Give me the opportunity. I am standing as the leader of Vision New Zealand, And I would hope that people would see me as an individual, not as somebody else's wife. I've taken on a leadership responsibility as Hannah Tamaki. What I do and my actions and the team that represent me in Vision New Zealand are the main focus. It's not about who I'm married to. And I just hope that the media get this message. I am no longer going to tolerate people putting me in the shadow of my husband.
Did you ask him to take the post down from Facebook because it's been removed?
No,
so did you guys have a chat about that?
I have not. We have not chatted about it because, to be honest, I have not even hardly been on Facebook after I saw that post. I've been too
Are you
busy doing a
offended
whole
by
lot of
his
other
comments
things.
as well? I'm asking you, as leader of Vision New Zealand, are you offended by those comments?
I'm not offended, no. I might not like some things that are said and done, but I'm not going to.
So do you disagree with the comments he's made?
To talk with you about what Brian does. I'm here to say my actions today are a follow-through of a leader of a political party, and this conversation between you and I is purely about me sacking somebody who I class as a very close friend, but have now said, this is it, I've drawn a line, and you're over there and we're over here, and I'm moving forward to be positive and to encourage people to get to know who Vision New Zealand is and to get to know who Hannah Tamaki is, the leader of Vision New Zealand. This is not about dragging in a whole lot of other people. This is about people focusing on the leader and what the leader has to say and what the leader wants to do and what the leader's prepared to take into the future of Vision New Zealand.
Did the leader want to dance on Dancing with the Stars? And when did you find out you got the boot?
What are you talking about?
Come on.
Did the leader want to... What are you talking about, Lisa?
Dancing with the Stars. Did you want to dance?
I rang them up and asked them, could I please be on Dancing with the Stars? I don't think so.
No, I understand. I understand you weren't available last season and that you were invited on again this season. So Javan has confirmed that you had accepted.
What was the reason? What was the reason that I didn't take up? And you know what? I don't even think I'm a star. I'd rather be known as the leader of Vision New Zealand. And you know what? If I'm going to be tagged with anything, tag me with this. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, and I'm a great-grandmother. And I'm very loyal to families who are committed to loving their families and helping them. I'd rather be
When
tagged
did you
with
hear
that.
that you had been dumped from the program?
Oh, are you telling me something that I... Oh, are you telling me something?
I'm asking a question.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And that was Hannah Tamaki. And late this afternoon, MediaWorks did confirm in a statement it had indeed dumped Hannah Tamaki from this year's series of Dancing with the Stars. MediaWorks says it was originally planned for Hannah to take part in the show. We now recognise this was a mistake and we apologise. We have seen a very strong reaction, some of which has been extreme and concerning, and MediaWorks does not condone bullying. We would be failing in our duty of care to everyone if we continued as planned. A new front has opened up in West Auckland's tree saga with a Ngāti Whātua representative delivering a stinging rebuke to the Waitemata local board today. The plan to get rid of some 200 pine trees has already proven hugely controversial among a group of Western Springs locals, but had up until this morning been a predominantly Pākehā protest. But Ngāti Whātua historian and tikanga expert Joe Pihama says the local board has derailed its relationship with the iwi by failing to consult. Matthew Tunison reports.
It was meant to be the day the long-running dispute over the 199 pine trees in Western Springs Lakeside Park was resolved, with the board expected to vote in favour of lopping the trees and replanting the park with natives. But then stepped up Joe Pihama.
My mana whenua has been diminished by a voting process which says you get a vote, you get a vote, you get a vote, but Ngāti Whātua, who are the mana whenua tūturu, we are always blocked. And again, I say to the council and to the local board, whakatika i a koe. Look at yourself, correct yourself.
Mr Pihama forced an 11th hour delay, saying the board consulted Ngāti Awa, predominantly from Bay of Plenty, but failed to talk to mana whenua.
That there was a direct takahi on the mana of my people. That there was a direct takahi on the mana of Ngāti Whātua. Mana whenua of Tamaki Makaurau, of this area here.
Mr Pihema invited the board members to his marae for a cup of tea, but said it was the board's turn to reach out and restore a damaged relationship.
What I'm saying to you is whatever advice you bring with your cultural learnings and with your expertise, I'm afraid you've severely derailed the relationship at this moment between this board and Ngāti Whātua.
Along with board chairperson Richard Northey, Mr Pihema took aim at Deputy Chair Karen Leone, the only Māori on the board, and that did not go down well with Ms Leone.
I felt that was very disrespectful to point me out. That was not correct to do that in that way. And if you need to do that in the future, then have a separate korero with me. Don't put me in a situation where you are going to actually single me out in front of a whole board here, made up of 7 people that all equally have that responsibility. Because I actually feel that I've been tuck ahead now.
Ms Leone says the board had consulted with a member of Ngāti Whātua, but Mr Pihema says they were not the correct point of contact and the information hadn't been shared with the wider iwi. And the sparks continued to fly when activist Lisa Prager described how she had claimed mana whenua status in her bid to save the trees, but now regrets the move. Board member Julie Sanderlands refused to thank Ms Prager for her submission because, she said, her comments were a bit racist.
Why am I racist in that?
No, we don't have a dialogue with the audience.
If someone's going to call me a racist, they bloody stand up and justify it. Because I am many things, but I am not a racist.
The board will discuss the matter again on the 17th of March. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Matthew Tunison tēnei.
It's 6:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A South Taranaki iwi is demanding answers after an ammonia leak at South Taranaki meat processor killed more than 1,000 fish and eels. The leak at Silver Ferns Farms, Hawera plant, last week is now being described as a significant environmental incident that has contaminated several kilometres of the Tawhiti stream, which flows into the lower Tangahoe River. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
A faulty valve caused the initial gas leak on Wednesday, sparking a full-scale emergency services response. Staff were evacuated and nearby residents told to stay inside and shut windows and doors and turn off air conditioning units. A 1-kilometre cordon was also put in place around the facility. Ngāti Ruanui iwi leader Debbie Ngariwa Packer says the first dead eels began appearing on Thursday.
And we weren't too sure, are we talking about a whole population or just some of it? And the reality was is that we got confirmed Friday night that it was a complete kill and that the whole catchment from Lower Tawhiti Road into Tangahoe River was had been affected.
Ms Ngariwa Packer says it appears the contamination is a result of the effort to contain the initial gas leak.
The emergency services who they have on hand, and I guess the community emergency services then apply a spray of some sort, and it turns into liquid, and it's then expelled into the stormwater and released. We think some may have actually gone over the road into the river as well, but that's effectively how it leaked into the water.
Ms Ngariwa Packer wants assurances it can never happen again. Sally Gore is an associate professor at the University of Canterbury's School of Physical and Chemical Sciences. Ms Gore says ammonia is often used under pressure as a coolant in industrial processes. She says if it leaks, spraying it with water is a normal response.
Now, ammonia gas is very, very soluble in water, so that would be why they would have sprayed it, and then that would help lower the gas levels around the area to make it safe, because ammonia is very, very toxic to people, can kill people when the concentrations get high enough, and then that water would have then made its way into the local water body.
But Ms Gore says the liquid form of ammonia is also toxic.
Now, you don't need very much of the dissolved form of ammonia, which is known as ammonium, in a water body to be toxic to fish. And it's very, very toxic, and it's known when you have these kinds of spills that fish kills are likely. You certainly wouldn't want to drink it, and the fish aren't going to like it very much either.
Meanwhile, the representative of local hapu, Hapotiki and Hamua, Rukatai Watney, says they're gutted.
It's going to wash away, but, we've lost a whole generation of eels. Now is the silver belly run, where all the silver bellies start to run now to the sea. And all of our people are usually down there catching them. So, it's impacted on our hapu pretty bad, and they are all pretty pissed off.
Mr Watney says the Taranaki Regional Council has described the epicentre of the spill as a kill zone.
The migrating eels, they've got to come past that kill zone. And Tāwiti Stream is one of the places where the long-finned eels actually are in. So, as it is, the long-finned tuna are virtually extinct. So if we get bugger all now, just imagine what the spill can do.
The Regional Council declined an interview. In a statement, it says it was alerted to a potential fish kill on Friday and had so far discovered more than 1,000 dead fish and eels. It describes it as a significant environmental event. And although the Regional Council says Silverfern Farms is cooperating with its investigation, the company also turned down an interview with RNZ. In an email, it admits the ammonia leak killed the fish, but stopped short of explaining how the ammonia got into the stream. Meanwhile, a rāhui has been placed on the Tawhiti Stream and the South Taranaki District Council has erected public health warning signs. I Taranaki mo te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Robin Martin ahau.
A program to install webcams on Kapiti Island is being expanded in an effort to clamp down on illegal poachers. The first webcam was installed at the end of 2018 and another last year, and it's already having an impact, drastically increasing the number of reported offences. Our video journalist Logan Church went to have a look at how it's working.
It's early in the morning, and people of all ages are being ferried across to Kapiti Island, about an hour and a half boat ride from the mainland. They're here to snorkel with Mountains to Sea Trust. Its Wellington head, Maureen Hickey, says the aim is to educate people about the ecological value of the Kapiti Marine Reserve.
Well, I think what we want to do is connect people with nature and give people a chance to see what can happen if there's marine life in a really protected area. So you go out there and it's absolutely flourishing. Diving below the surface, the ocean floor is abundant with paua and all types of fish, including blue moki and kingfish. The Kapiti Marine Reserve is looked after by a small dock team and volunteers.
They're home to quite the bounty of high-value marine species, and when I say high value ecologically, but also economically to some people. So crayfish, paua, butterfish, snapper, blue cod. There's a much greater abundance of those species within the reserve than there is outside of the reserve.
That's Ben Knight of local group Guardians of Kapiti Marine Reserve. He says the vast amount of marine life there has proven to be tempting to some who would turn to illegal poaching. But enforcement isn't always easy.
There's still one really big challenge that the local dock team have, which is one boat to patrol Taputuranga Marine Reserve, to service Mana Island and to do the work up here at Kapiti. That's based down at Mana, but it's a 25k single trip, so 50k round trip for that boat to come up here to respond.
Dock confirmed to checkpoints there are no plans to purchase a second boat, and it's applying for funding to replace the one they currently have, which is 15 years old. And knowing money was tight, locals came up with a plan. They fundraised and got the support of Dock to install a webcam in late 2018 to look out over the area 24/7, and another was added last year. Ben, who oversaw the project, says the number of reported offences has dramatically increased.
It was in the order of 200 to 300% in the first year. Hopefully we see a reduction over time in the amount of gear that we're removing from the reserve. Even just out here last summer I was diving, it's right in front of the dock base. It's a pretty high profile spot, well known in terms of being part of the reserve. We found fishing gear, just hook, line and sinkers on the bottom just out here.
And now they're planning to add a far more powerful camera at the top of the island at a cost of $20,000.
The site up at Tūtira Moana is just under $20,000 to establish that site. The camera will have a 45 times optical zoom. It's also got some new tech which will enable us to get a chart position for any object that we're zoomed in on and focused on. But obviously that comes with a price tag. Just getting the gear up there, it's got to be flown in by helicopter, so there's a bunch of logistics there.
It will look west towards the area of the reserve not visible from the mainland and can be used by the authorities for surveillance. In 2019, Dock recorded 15 instances of things like issuing warnings and prosecutions, more than double the previous year from when there were no webcams watching. Local Carl Webber, who lives on an island nearby, is also part of the Guardians group. and says his goal is for there to eventually be at least 7 cameras covering the reserve.
The plan with the webcams for our marine reserve, the primary focus on it for me is a deterrent factor. So if people know there's cameras on our marine reserve, they're not going to intentionally get in there and be wanting to take stock out or poach it. And we can use the cameras for partial evidence for compliance stuff if we need to.
It's not just about surveillance though. Lorna Dugan of Experiencing Marine Reserves says awareness and education is a big factor in promoting the protection of marine reserves around the country. And that's why Lorna thinks it's important that people, especially kids, get out and experience them.
The reason we have to teach people about marine reserves is we need to have areas within our wild spaces that are protected so that people are able to go outside them and inside them and be able to see the difference and see how our local areas are quite often very degraded.
On Kapiti Island for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
A Huntley woman who found thousands of wasps nesting in her home says it was a beautiful thing to behold. Carla Ferguson had seen wasps in her kitchen for weeks before she decided to check it out yesterday. She explained what happened to our reporter Mackenzie Smith.
It was insane. That whole bottom part of the nest was just riddled with wasps. Like, Robbie would pull it out and it would just be a fistful of wasps in some sections, and not to mention what was killed outside, and then all the eggs and the larvae and what was due to hatch. There were thousands more, and that's what Robbie had said, lucky we got him in when we did, because our problem was about to become so much more worse.
And how did you feel, knowing that this was there the whole time?
To be honest, I probably should feel disgusted or devastated that my kitchen's been ripped apart, but I was just way more fascinated than anything. But it was disgusting, don't get me wrong, but at the same time I couldn't stop looking at it. It was just, at the same time it's beautiful, it's crazy to think that they can do that in such a short amount of time, but it was just, I thought it was awesome to watch.
And we've got to fly back tomorrow.
Z News headlines at 6:30. Top government ministers are currently meeting tourism bosses and airport chiefs to discuss how best to cope with the fallout from the COVID-19 coronavirus. A jury has found a West Auckland man who killed his mother with a hammer guilty of her murder. An Auckland lawyer has been sentenced to almost 3 years in prison for helping the Comancheros gang hide their millions. And the Prime Minister says New Zealand First has no more say over the government's fisheries policy than Labour or